Hello, welcome to Red Sky's game prep for session 22, Night Moves. My name's Pete, I'm otherwise known as Caustic Worm, and we will go over prep for the next session, which is coming up this coming Tuesday. This is the second one of the series, and I did one last week that was, the audio was a little loud, or the background music was a little loud on it. Hopefully this is better this time. But for this particular session, I will kind of go over what happened in the last game, kind of give a recap of that, and so we can use that moving forward for the actual prep. We'll go over any possible changes we need to make for the adventure that will hopefully end on this particular upcoming session, and then because this is sort of the end of an arc, we'll talk a little bit about what the next arc might be. This one's kind of unique in the sense that after this session, the players should have a ship of their own, and they'll be able to kind of go wherever they want to in the Sea of Tears. Actually, anywhere on Nyravine if they wish. They just can't go over the side. They have a traditional ship, not a sky ship. So. As an addendum to all that, sometime in the next week or two, I'll do sort of a post-mortem of the previous arc, which I called the Defiant arc. Kind of a thing of what went right, what went wrong, and what happened with the other group that was also playing the same campaign. They had a completely different experience to what the Tuesday night group did. So let's get to it. Let's go over what happened last session. So the last session, the adventurers sailed away from the Mad Dog Reed's ship, the Defiant, on the Sea Spray with Mr. Scabs as their captain. He immediately started making them do most of the main jobs, including making Eyeless navigate the ship to the destination, the Silent Shoals. Eyeless and Pradith decided to kind of chart their way around the Arch Isles, and for the most part didn't have a lot of issues except for near the evening of the first day where they kind of overshot their turn to the south. Scabs also kept Marcus and Dresda on night duty that first night, while the rest of the group got a long rest. There was some belief that this was trying to make it so that the people he hated the most were always the tired the most. Who knows? During that night, though, True did talk with Marcus about possibly liberating the ship if necessary, given the fact that, almost half the crew kind of hated Scabs and his guys. The next day, the ship continued its journey south along the western side of the Arch Isles, and let's give a little bit of a map here. So they started up in this area right here, up in here, and they came around the Arch Isles here. Kind of overshot a little bit, so they kind of went a little farther here and then came down this way. And they're coming down this way to go through right around in here, which is where the Silent Shoals are on this particular map. So they started coming down this way on that second day. Marcus and Hilo on the previous day had discovered some pages in a secret compartment while fixing some cannonball holes, and were unable to read it. So they had given it to Eyeless, who also couldn't read it. But Pradith, with Azra's gift of being able to read pretty much anything, was able to read some of it, but not all of it. The portions that he could understand seemed to be some new spells related to some new magic. Shouldn't use spells in this because I'm trying to be generic. Some new magic that could manipulate gravity in various ways. The rest of the papers seemed to have been scrambled with a cipher of some sort, so he was unable to, while he could read the language, it didn't make any sense to him. And it did swim a little bit before his eyes. I mean, all of it was written in a form of Draconic. The rest of the day went by without pretty much any incident. They, continuing to sail south as they're trying to get to the shoals. And soon the night crew was set up, which included Hilo, Rux, and Eyeless in night crew. So kind of busting the whole thing of Scabs is just trying to keep some people tired. and more that, hey, you're a skeleton crew, you get your turn on duty. That night, while Dresda was taking her turn to watch, the group was still taking watches. It's still taking watches because they're concerned that Scab's guys are gonna, try to either throw them over the board or smother them in their sleep or something. But while Dresda was taking her watch, Blinby, the gnome, got her attention and got her. Basically, they went into another room and talked about the fact that Blinby had overheard a conversation from Scab's guys talking about dropping off the lot of them at the shoals. Kind of came up with a funny moment of the campaign where Dresda kind of was like, well, they're just going to put us over the side, when it was pretty clear Blinby was meaning that they were going to kill them and drop them over the side. So given that, Dresda tried to wake up Marcus. So she did wake up Marcus quietly enough and talked to him briefly about it. Then the two of them started trying to wake people up, and through a comedy of errors and poor stealth rolls and, D&D, they actually woke up some of the people they didn't mean to wake up. And this kind of led to a fight in the crew berth between Marcus, Dresda, Aaron, True, Blinby, and one other person, Pradith, against like three of the former crew members of the Sea Spray, who were kind of talking and working with Scabs. But it was all done silently because True cast a silent spell in the middle of the cavern, or the middle of the cabin, and they had almost gotten away with everything except for one of the crew member got out and shouted for basically about 6-7 seconds before he was pulled back in and then knocked out. So that's kind of where the session ended. The people down below don't know who heard the shout. The people up above did hear the shout. So Rux, Eyeless, and Hilo definitely heard the shout, but so did the two members who are not their allies up above as well. And it's very clear that Scabs heard it as well, because the door opened from his cabin and he kind of stepped out and said, "Did anybody else hear that?" To kind of finish the session and stop it there. So that's kind of where the session ended. At this point, there really isn't much left. Like, we kind of talked about this last time. I expected them to make it all the way to the shoals, start to navigate through the shoals, and then have hold on. Let's go with a quick warning here before I go any further. So, from here on out, this should be true. Spoilers alert. So, last time we talked about, I expected them to make it to the shoals and start navigating it through, and then have the siren call, trap them. Or at least that was what Scab's intent is to have happen. They're not to the shoals yet. In fact, it's still nighttime. They're probably somewhere, they're maybe a few hours away from the shoals, so they're not too far away. But I mean, they've started their mutiny as it is right now. So that's already the first change from the last session. We don't have to worry about the siren, at least insofar as them being caught by its song while they're trying to navigate. That doesn't mean after the mutiny is done that they don't go that way. We'll talk about that here in a little bit when we kind of go over how this next session is gonna go. For the most part, there's not a lot that needs to be changed. Like, again, they started the mutiny already. We just have to complete the mutiny, and if they win it, which seems likely now since they've kind of split these two people apart, or the two groups apart to some extent, it does seem really rather likely that they'll successfully take over the ship. So at that point, we have to start thinking about what's going to happen once they've done that. So, and that's kind of really the ending of the arc, is when they've got the ship. That's when I want to start the next thing. And so let's kind of update our stuff. So here was the last episode. I don't really need to change anything here, so I'm going to do what I normally do and just edit the plot and copy it and start making the next one, just like I normally do. Let's see here. All right, now that we got this, we will make ourselves a new plot article. Always fun. We are calling this one episode 22, Night Moves. Now I'm calling it Night Moves because they started their mutiny at night, and so they got to finish they're finishing it at night, so might as well call it Night Move. And somehow I have made it all strike through. I don't know how that happened, but that must be this S down here. Let's back up and fix that. How I did this when I did the copy is my guess. All right, so this is going to start during the night of Sowing Tide the 27th. That's how far they've gotten so far. And we'll be having started a mutiny. It's only a matter of time until they need to finish it or get caught. Alright, so details of this one. Kind of mutiny has started. Adventurers need to complete taking over the ship. Once completing that, they have a moral quandary to deal with. Do they execute any prisoners? Do they strand them? It's a possibility. And do they go somewhere and give up the ship? Because technically it's not theirs. So I actually expect there to be like maybe the first third to half of the session to be finishing off the mutiny, and then at that point I can either stop, but I would really prefer to actually give them a full session. So a couple things will happen at that point. Either they're going to discuss like amongst themselves where they want to go next, and what they want to do. Like, do they want to kill these people, Scabs and his guys, or are they just going to drop them off at an island and strand them there, or what do they want to do? Do they want to try to take them in for the bounty? That's also a possibility. These guys are pirates, so at least a couple of them are probably known and probably have bounties on them, so they could take them somewhere and potentially get some money. And then the question is where? The ship is going to be considered hot to some extent, and they're going to have to resolve that issue. Meaning either they're going to have to go have the ship's renamed and refit and a few things like that, or they're going to have to go and take it to some authorities and say, hey, this was a ship that was taken over at sea, and we liberated it from the pirates. Here are the pirates. What do you want us to do with the ship? And there are sort of the rules of salvage. In some sense, the captain is no longer there. He's on the Defiant at this point, being ransomed. But maybe there is some company that he works part of, and this is their ship. That sort of stuff. So that's kind of where we're going. So let me go back over my notes for what I was going to talk about here. So yeah, that's kind of the high overview. Let's get into a little more detail in what's going to happen in the first kind of half. Like I was saying, it's pretty clear that Scabs definitely heard the thing from below, and clearly the NPCs from above also heard it. It's just a question of how the players that are on night duty react, and how that leads to the players below kind of coming up and dealing with it. If the players of Hilo, Ilis, and Rux don't play it very well, then more than likely Scabs will call for some of his guys to come out and see what's going on, because he doesn't trust the player characters at all. But if they get some good diplomacy rolls, persuasion rolls, deception rolls, maybe they can at least get Scabs to go back to bed and then try to find out below and continue this as sort of a surprise attack. That's kind of a possibility. It's also very possible that the players can roleplay this one out without a fight at all. I mean, Scabs doesn't want to really die over this. I mean, he wants to. He's kind of cowardly at heart. He just, he's the typical bully, kind of cowardly at heart. When you really truly confront him, he doesn't want to really risk his own life for this. He would rather just be thrown in manacles, put in the bilge, and be a pain in their ass when they get to port, by trying to imply that they're the pirates and that he was captured and that sort of stuff. So that's kind of where he's going to lead this. That being said, two of his men, Sefu and Khan, they are kind of blustery ruffians that don't like to be captured for any reason, especially Sefu. So they'll fight for quite a bit, until they're probably less than a third of their hit points, and then they'll probably give up. Lys and Galt, who are the other two named guys on the thing, pretty quickly see that the way the wind is blowing and kind of surrender pretty quickly after Sefu and surrender. Yeah, that's kind of where we're going here. Let's see here. Back to this. So we're on the 27th. This whole thing right here can go away. So we're going to say adventurers can press their attack or try to convince Scabs and his guys they are on the losing side. I'll do this. I would say that if for every... So they've already got 3 of Scab's men under their control, tied up, knocked out, whatever you want to call it. So I would say at this point it's already down to like a 10-on-7 kind of fight. Although really a 9-on-7 kind of fight, because Rat is pretty much out for the count. He got his throat slit pretty quickly in the last session. So a 9-on-7. I think that the DC to convince Scabs that nothing is going on will require a DC 15 persuasion or deception roll. In this sense, if they he doesn't really trust them, so this is that's why it's somewhat artificially high for 4th level characters. 15 isn't terribly hard. It's basically like a 10 for somebody who's proficient in it and has a decent charisma, so it's not a 10 on the die, so it's a 50-50 chance at this point kind of thing. So that's actually not too bad. So I actually think I might go up to a 16 or a 17, so which makes it a little bit more difficult because he's already suspicious of everything. So we're gonna go with that. If this fails, Scabs will start calling for the rest of his crew, rest of his men, which will take a couple of rounds for them to wake up, get weapons, and head out to the main deck. Ironically, the silent spell down below is still going on, so even if the people up above continue to shout, actually, I think the silent spell is 10 minutes, so it's still going on down below. And the interesting part is it's on the deck below, and it's a 20-foot radius spell, so you can literally walk through part of it on the upper deck, and I really should put that in there. So if he walks into there and suddenly can't hear anything, he definitely will know something's going on, and it doesn't matter what the persuasion roll is. He will just he'll pop back out of it and start shouting for his men. So we've got that. If the persuasion roll works, if the roll succeeds, then Scabs will look will go back to his cabin. So it gives him a chance to get out of this without too much things there, and then they can continue to do whatever they want. Otherwise, the fight picks up again. Is there anything else really here? No. Like I was saying before, Sefu and Khan will fight if possible. Even if nobody else fights, they will fight until down to a third of their hit points, HP. Lise and Galt will join only if Scabs is fighting, and Scabs will join if they outnumber or equal the number of fighters. So, and once he starts enemies, once Scabs starts fighting, he will stop when he goes below half hit points, or if more than 5 of his crew gets knocked out. So I mean, this whole thing is Scabs wants to kill them, but he doesn't want to die. So he's more than willing to just say, you know what, you guys, this is for you. You guys, this is yours now. I'm going to surrender. I think that kind of brings that up right there. All right. So once they've done that, the ship now belongs to the adventurers, and so they kind of need to decide to do what's next. Once they control the ship, Blinby, who's one of the NPCs, will suggest they head to Tirok's Landing. As a place where they can, as she knows some people there who owe her a favor. And could help, refit the ship and make it less hot, so to speak. The adventurers also need to decide what they're going to do with the prisoners. Are they going to kill them, drop them off at an island, take them to some authorities, maybe get a bounty. These are all possibilities. They can keel haul. They can do some to each of them. Like they could say that, you know what, Trek, no one knows anything about you. And you didn't really do a lot against us, so we're gonna drop you off on an island. But Galt and Lise, you guys are getting keel hauled, and Scabs, you probably worth a lot of money, so we're gonna take you to Tirok's Landing and get the bounty for you. I mean, that's kind of where we're at here with that sort of stuff if they want. So that's kind of that part of it. Blinby's going to suggest Tirok's Landing, but that doesn't mean they have to go to Tirok's Landing. They could also go to Port Hope or Wensmar, Calastria if they wanted to. They'd have to go through the wall, so they'd have to spend a little more time, and they're tracking into the wind, the westerlies, so they'll be slower going. Or even Emmerdal, if they wanted to. Now they don't. I mean, do they have enough supplies for that? Well, that's another thing to check. I mean, they need to check what is all on the ship. So we kind of have to come up with that. What is all still on the ship? I mean, remember Mad Dog and his guys took a lot of the stuff off because they raided it, but they left enough food and things like that for the crew of 20 to make it to wherever Flotsam is. So, at that point, how much is that? And they still have that same crew. They still have 20. So if that amount of food was 5 days, let's say, because it actually was about 5 days to get to Flotsam, then they have 5 days of food to get someplace. What they also don't know is that there is a leak in the bilges that basically continues to steadily get worse unless they continue to patch it every day. And if they fail a patching check, then that starts to the ship doesn't immediately sink. Like, it basically becomes hey, you only got a couple days before you have to be somewhere to really patch it. You're just not able to patch it very well anymore. So that's another thing that will come up over the course of this. So the ship has a leak in the bilges that requires a DC 15. We'll call it strength check to fix. Is it really a strength check? I don't know. We'll come up with something. And if failed by 5 or more, the leak gets worse, and reduces the amount of sailing time to 2 days. So that's another thing that's going on there. Not as big of a deal because they're literally a day from Tirax Landing. They're like 2 days from Port Hope, a day and a half from Wensmar. They could go to Escala too, I guess. Escala is about a day and a half. It's north of Tirax Landing. So there's several places they can get to. So that means that bilges. That means that we need to make some maps. So here in a little bit, we'll kind of make up some initial maps for Tirax Landing and stuff like that. I don't necessarily feel that we need something massively accurate there. We just need some ideas so that if they go there, we can sort of, in this session, we have something they can at least interact with. I mean, for the most part, though, we can do it as theater of the mind. I just need some things like, hey, here's what's in Tirax Landing. And I do have a few things like that. We'll go over that here in a second. So let's talk about some alternate possibilities. There's not really a lot. The alternate possibilities are, where they go. Where do they go with the ship? I mean, I'm hoping Tirax Landing. That's what the NPC is going to suggest. Doesn't mean that that's where they're going to go. It's a suggestion intended for me to prod them to go over there initially. I have some ideas of how I might want to do some small little adventure there, but they don't have to. They can say, hey, our initial attempt was to get to Calastria. Let's continue to try to get there. So if that's the case, Calastria is a big enough city that I won't be able to come up with everything that's necessary and needed for that. So I would have them sail to there, and as they start coming into the harbor, that's where we'd end the session. They need to really talk about what they're going to do next anyway. So there's talking about what they're going to do with the prisoners, but they also need to talk about what they are going to do next. So I mean, what are they as a group going to do? Like, originally they all got on this ship for disparate reasons. Eyeless because he's trying to get to Emerdal and find a wizard who's part of this group called the Sigil. He doesn't know a lot about the Sigil. He just knows a woman called Faela told him to go there and that they could help him out with his powers. Marcus and Hilo got on the ship because they were looking to get off the docks and, start learning a different trade. Marcus because he wanted to get away from the smuggling business for a bit. Hilo because he was just looking for something to do. So they're on the ship because of that. Rux was already on the ship as the ship's surgeon. So, he doesn't really have a specific spot he's trying to get to. But, I mean, he is a former slave from Calastria. Maybe he wants to go there and try to help out his family or something like that, now that he's sort of got a little bit of freedom. Praedyth has had a vision from his god, his benefactor, his patron, whatever you want to call it, since he's a warlock. And he has no idea where that is, but clearly she's trying to tell him to go somewhere. Dres the same thing. She's been given a vision from the spirits to say that, hey, you need to find the Eye of Echoes. No idea what that is or where it is. So maybe that aligns well with the wizard, trying to find the wizard. Maybe the wizard can help her figure out what that is or where it might be or anything like that. So I believe, like, having some information about Glastrier, Emerdal, Tyrok's Landing, all are good things for this, for towards the ending of this level or this session. After this session, we're going to take a week off, and then pick it up a week later to give myself a little bit of chance to, hopefully they'll have made some decisions as part of their discussion during this session, and I'll be able to, plan more accordingly for what they do. Yeah. So that's really the big thing. The 27th, we're gonna finish this. Let's talk a little bit about some of the places they can go. So let's see here. So alternate possibilities. Let's do this. All right, I want to go with, here we go, Tyrok's Landing. All right, so we kind of talked a little bit about Escala, or we didn't, but in another plot thing I've talked about, I kind of came up with some stuff in Escala, but I didn't do it for Tyrok's Landing because they weren't going there. But now let's talk a little bit about Tyrok's Landing. I'm bringing up my notes that I did while I was running around town today and walking and things like that. So Tyrok's Landing, if we go back to the map, Tyrok's Landing is on this spit of land right over here. In fact, there you see my little thing. It's a smaller port on the northwestern side of North Ferran. It's the most western town in the Mergale League. Being so far from the capital of the League, this town is a bit more rough and tumble, a little less, sort of looking for, not lawless. They definitely have laws, and they definitely have there's a Mergale's garrison there, and Mergale naval ships stop here every so often. It's not as finely in step with the capital city of Caer Mergale. That's all. That's more what I mean by rough and tumble here. So a few more things that I've come up with since was walking this morning and doing stuff. It's interesting to figure out a lot of stuff while you're taking a walk. Tyrok's Landing is named Tyrok's Landing because the dwarf sailor Tyrok crashed there. He crashed on a spit of land with a large tower overlooking the sea. Now, when he first crashed, he was suitably angry. He was like, "Why is this lighthouse not providing me any kind of guidance?" And it turns out that when he finally got up there, like, he crashed because western side, lots of marine layer. It was foggy. He kind of hit the rocks that are kind of near there. So making it up to the top of this cliff and this hill, he found out that the tower wasn't a lighthouse at all. It was an abandoned wizard's tower. So, the reason why he figured that out is he breaks in at some point and finds all this wizard stuff in there that looks relatively recently in use. Now, Tyrok's Landing was basically established about 50 years ago, so this is definitely a bit back. But so being stuck there for a while, he finally realized where he was at, and he kind of set up an initial camp and things like that. Figured out once he could see the next day, he realized there was actually a pretty decent cove here to the south of this thing, and it wasn't a bad place to potentially have a small village or town or that sort of stuff. So he marked it on his map and went on his merry way. And then about a few months later, a few years later, so him crashing was probably about 60 years ago. A few years later, he decided to retire. He was like, he remembered this spot and went and started setting up some stuff there. And a small village started building up around it with some fishermen, because it was on, as you can see, it's on the North Ferran Island. There's already Maribel here in this cove. So there's already people on here. They just started gravitating to where some of the actual main, where people were actually starting to find good places to live. So there's a lovely jungle forest not too far away from there that he was able to get some trees and stuff from. Built himself a small place to live, and eventually some of his crew members started joining him. Pardon me. And soon, within about 10 years, there was a small village there of fishermen and that sort of stuff. So, but there's still this tower there that nobody was in. Eventually, they when the part broke in. They knew there was a wizard there, or at least there should have been, but they couldn't find him. The wizard never showed up after a decade. So they eventually repurposed it to be an actual lighthouse. They refit part of the top of the tower and put some lights and stuff on it so that they could actually stop ships from crashing into the rocks there. As Caramel Gale kind of expanded out, they took over North Ferran. They built a garrison here because it was a nice western portion where they could have the Navy kind of stop off, resupply and things like that on their way to the western portion of the Sea of Tears. And so since that happened, the village has grown even faster. There's now about 500, 600 people in the village, with a small temple to Hainari, the water goddess, the goddess of water, as well as what else did I have written down here? As well as a general store, a blacksmith, a couple, 2 inns, 3 taverns. It's now got several docks and warehouses to house things. North Ferran actually now has a bit more. If you look at this, Mirabal is in a calm bay, and much of the trade from the island goes through there, but some of it goes through Tirax Landing. Not a lot, but some of it does. Tirax is more important as a military kind of spot than it is anything else. So that's the gist of that. So we've got a little bit there. So now that we got that, let's give Tirax Landing a few things. So we said there was 2 inns. Well, so 2 inns. One I've already got a name for. It's called the Northwest. Get it? The thing is in the northwestern part, the Northwest. I don't have one for the second. I'll figure that out later. 3 taverns. One is called the Thirsty Barnacle. That one's actually going to be on the docks. Don't have the other 2 yet. We'll figure that out. I'm thinking that there should be what did I have here? There's a garrison. There's a small Nergale garrison. There should also be, there's Madame, what did I call her? Madame Zugenia's. Now you're going to say, well, that sounds like a brothel. That's actually not the brothel. She's a local fortune teller. As part of John's character, Marcus, he's been trying to find more about local legends and tales and stuff like that. So we won't get to it this session, but if they actually go to Tirax Landing, the next session I'm going to go over if they talk to somebody in the taverns and he asks that question, I actually have one available for him this time, which is going to be, there's a ghost that's being seen over the last 15 to 20 years. They've been seeing a ghost. It's hard to make out, but they think it's a male figure. The closest that anybody's ever gotten to it, near the tower, by the way, near the wizard's tower, is they claimed that it was that it looked like an elderly man who was beckoning for them near the edge of the cliff, and so people think it's somebody who fell off the cliff at one point and fell to their death is what they think it is, and that this started happening about 25 years ago. So that's sort of a ghost story that one of them will say if they ask about the tower, they'll get the story of how Tirac crashed here and found that it was a wizard's tower that was empty. Not empty in the sense that the wizard stuff was all there. Like, he found wizard equipment, he found wizard books, he found hearth, that sort of stuff, but the wizard literally was not there and just has never come back, as far as anybody can tell. So there's that one. So giving him a couple of those sorts of stories, and I'll embellish it in the sense of, the wizard not being found. They'll probably have embellished that some demon has taken him, and so most people tend to stay away from the inside of the tower, but they've since added some stuff on the outside of the tower for lighting and stuff like that. So Tirok's Landing is going to have a brothel. We'll come up with a name for it. An herbalist. We want our adventurers to be able to get some potions, if they so desire. A blacksmith. Oh, and the biggest one here is a shipwright, so they can get the ship refit. Lastly, and probably the biggest portion, and the reason why Blinby knows about this, is a group called Sasiva. Now, the Sasiva is a local group of rogues and ruffians and toughs. They are the remnants of the local Kraken cell. So in this case, the local Kraken cell kind of fell to petty squabbles and things like that, and kind of broke apart. And a couple of the members of the Kraken basically created their own group called the Sasiva, and they're sort of the criminal underworld of this small town. I mean, 500 people is not a huge town, but they do have hooks into Mirabal, so they're not just here. They have hooks in Mirabal as well, and they, unlike the Kraken who does the cell kind of thing, are not. They are all led by a single guy whose name I don't have yet, but not important quite yet. At least, because again, once they get to one of these spots next time, I'm gonna probably stop there, and then we'll pick it up next in the session thereafter. All right, so that's kind of Tirok's Landing. That's enough for now for me. At least if they get there and start to do some stuff, I can move on from there. Let us talk about. There's actually Mirabal. I totally forgot about Mirabal. I don't really have a lot for it right now, but let's go to the next one here, which is Calastria. Calastria, we know, is a larger city on the Blustery Isles, and it is about 2,500 people. So it's a decent sized city. It sits on the cliffs overlooking a calm bay. So it's Calastria is kind of two cities, an upper city on the cliffs, and then a lower city, which is the docks and the port quarter and stuff like that. So upper city on the cliffs, and the lower city with docks and warehouses and merchant guilds and such. The upper city is mostly homes of plantation owners. So much of the island that Calastria is on is plantations run by Malazan slaves, and a few Searly or Diary taskmasters. Most of the plantations do sugar or coffee, or cacao, chocolate. That's most of what they do. There are some that do some more illicit drugs and things like that on Calastria. They're a little more out of the way. So there is a rather bustling in Calastria. I should write this down. Has a rather bustling drug trade as well. But the biggest thing about Calastria is above Calastria is Tinkertown. Now, Tinkertown is, why do I say above Calastria? Well, Tinkertown is built on the bottom of an floating island that is above the Blustery Isles, called the, what did I call them? I did call them something. I should have this here. So here's Calastria, Blustery Isles. They sit under the Shadow Isles. So the Shadow Isles is one above, and above that, so there are balloons, hot air balloons, that can transport people all the way up to Tinkertown, which is also called it's called something else, but glitter dust crags or something like that, or glitter crag, founded by a gnome who was looking for beryllium and did find it there. So there are beryllium mines up there, which is why it's even there in the first place. And it is an interesting place that will have some of its own adventures. It's built down from the bottom of the thing, so buildings and stuff are built down out of it. There's caves in there. There's actually a cave system that has been discovered that they don't know where it all leads to. There's a bunch of things like that, so it will be an interesting location for them to go to at some point, but not super relevant for next session, just because, other than letting people know it exists. And then last we were talking about was Emerdal as a possibility. Emerdal is a city on the western or the eastern side of Malazan. So that actually, or the Malaz Isle. If you'll look at my map again here real quick, Emerdal's all the way over here. This is the Malaz Isle, even though it's partially off the edge. This is home to the Dwarven Citadel of Delkavak, and the only way that you can talk with any dwarf from Delkavak is through Emerdal, and Emerdal is their trade hub, so to speak, and that is supposedly where a wizard that Eyeless is supposed to meet lives. And we'll kind of talk about that arc as an arc prep, which will be sort of next week. I think that gives us enough right now. Let's talk a little bit about that arc. Let me finish this off. Emerdal, trade city for the dwarves of Delkavak. City houses about 3,500 people. Most of them are actual people, like they're merchants and stuff that are set up. Like I said, I don't know if I've said it here, but all the dwarves live in the mountains. They basically trade with people in Emerdal. Any people they find outside of Emerdal in the mountains, they pretty much kill. They don't take trespassing lightly. So at this point in time, many merchant houses have set up in Emerdal, trade with the dwarves there, and then ship the goods to the east. So most of the people there are supporting all that trade and the merchant guilds. You're like, well, how do you need 3,500 people to do that? Well, remember, it's all support of that sort of stuff too. So there's blacksmiths and stuff that are in the city and shipwrights and dockyards and all that sort of stuff to support all the sort of the things that are needed to push to get people there. There's to get the goods from Delkavak to the other spot. Now, the dwarves of Delkavak do allow a caravan that comes up to their main citadel doors that does the trade and then comes back down. So that's the only way you get up to them. And again, like I said, this trade city basically supports all of that. And so it's about 3,500 people. Some of them are farmers and stuff like that, supporting the people that live there. Some of them are fishermen that fish around the thing. Lots of sailors and stuff like that call that their home when they're off duty and not on a ship, that sort of thing. So it's a good place to pick up a crew for your ship if you need one, especially if you're trying to be legit. If you're not trying to be as legit, then finding people wherever you can is also perfectly fine. that's good enough for Emerdal. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the next thing. I've kind of talked about this a little bit, which is, I've already set up some seeds, like I talked about Eyeless and the Sigil. I suspect that will most likely be the next arc. Having talked with a bunch of all the players one-on-one a couple weeks ago, I know kind of what they want to do, and all indicators are pointing towards potentially going to Emerdal next, and kind of following up with Eyeless and the Sigil. And like I said, also Dresda's thing for the Eye of Echoes lines up very well with that, because the Eyeless knows there's a wizard there. The wizard might be able to help them out and figure out where it's at. Praedyth and his vision. Praedyth's vision actually will take them to Calastria. The temple, the ruined temple that he saw, is actually on the island of Calastria, to the northern, or on the same island as Calastria, to the northern side. What I haven't decided there yet, and I need to decide, is whether or not that vision was sent by Azura, the Mistress of Fate, or if it was sent by the old one, the creature that they encountered at the end of the first arc. So I haven't figured out what I want to do there yet. So if they head that direction and that seems like that's where they want to go, well, then I'll finally figure out what that's going to be. Other than that, the rest of them are all kind of, not, I wouldn't call aimless, but they're kind of got further out, more overarching goals. Aaron is looking for his father. That's also another possibility. He, I believe, learned that his father, there might be some information about his father in Calastria, so that's another reason for him to go there. So that's kind of where we're at with those sorts of, seeds that I've set in the previous adventures, or at the very beginning of the campaign in the case of Aaron. That's it for this prep session. I know I didn't fill out everything as much inside of the plot document as I normally do, but some of the stuff I want to think about, and I don't expect to have to use most of this stuff, so this is just more start of things for the next sessions after that. We're going to take a week off after this session so I can get a small break, but I will still do a prep session next weekend at the same time. That's going to be an arc prep session, so hopefully by that point the players will have decided where they're going to go next, and that will turn into an arc. So the arcs moving forward are going to be a little weird in the sense that they're going to kind of be intertwined a little bit and things like that. Like everything becomes sort of a sandbox at this point, where the players can do whatever they want. So occasionally I'll throw some events in that lead us down the main plot, which if you watched my previous video on campaign prep, you'll know what I'm talking about for the main plot. But most of the time I just want them to be leading where we're going, and that sort of driving the story forward for the time being anyway. And I'll start dropping seeds of things and that sort of stuff in for various stuff for that. I'm also going to try to catch up on the previous arcs for this campaign. Also, I'll do a couple of streams, videos for that. One will be for the first arc, which I called Castaways, for when they were on the island, crashed on the island, and the second one will be a stream or a video for the current arc, which we're just kind of finishing up thing here, which is the Defiant, the ship that got press ganged onto as pirates. At some point, I will also we'll be starting to do a Design of the World stream or video. Tentatively, that is probably going to be happening on a Friday night, although on Friday nights I also want to do a prep stream for my other campaign that I'm running. So we'll see. That one's not for a few weeks anyway. But just to give you an idea of what might be coming up from me on my various videos and streams. Thanks for joining and listening in, listening to me ramble for a while, for about an hour or so at this point. It really helps me to get these ideas out and talk through, so I can make sure that they're sound and they make sense. Find any holes in them, that sort of stuff. Make sure there's nothing dumb, Sometimes if I don't talk through and you think about something in your head and you're like, oh, that sounds great, and then you speak about it out loud, you're like, oops, that's not as interesting as I thought it was going to be. So this is always a good way for me to figure that stuff, sort of figure that stuff out. So again, thanks for watching, and until next time, have fun gaming.